Friends, I welcome you to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It is not difficult for you, but it is pleasant for me. And we're starting. Until that day, life had been kind to me in many ways. How was I supposed to know that something simple, like a book left on a table in a restaurant by my office assistant, Joyce, would cause such a shock in my life? I came back from lunch and found Joyce swearing loudly at her computer. I assumed he was stuck again. I don't understand how some people can make Windows freeze just by looking at the computer, but Joyce was one of them. She was convinced that Bill Gates was waging a personal vendetta against her. But I usually found that she was using every damn bit of memory in her system, opening almost every conceivable document and running some program at the same time. I asked what was the reason for her obvious anger. I thought that pressing Alt, Control/DL at the same time, as usual, would solve her problem. But Joyce reported that she had lost the book she was reading. She tried to find a copy of it by going into history, but it turned out that it was no longer on sale, and it did not appear in any of the lists of the local library. Apparently, Joyce had bought the book from a used bookstore, and now she was extremely disappointed to lose it. I mean, she lost the damn thing and thought she'd never know how it ended. It's a mysterious story, she said. To be honest, the damn book isn't really that good. It's too damn long for me, but I just want to know how it ends. I soon forgot about the incident, a few days after it. Until, at the weekend, my wife Sarah began to turn over the gym when I tried to watch football on TV. Honey, did I do something that upset you? I asked. No, why? When you turn everything upside down here, while I'm trying to watch Map You on TV, it's a little distracting. I'm sorry, dear, but I can't find my book. I used to have it, but now I can't find it. Oh my God. Not another lost book. I had Joyce ranting about losing the book she'd been reading all damn week. I know it's a bit exaggerated, but that's what they usually say. Oh, what book did Joyce lose? I do not know about the Spanish doctor or something like that. Oh my God. Not the Spanish doctor in Paris. Yes, I think she said that it was called something like that. Actually, I wasn't listening. Have you read it, and can you tell at the end? I'm sorry, I can't. I've been reading it for a very long time, before Christina was born. I don't remember how it ended, but I think it was too long for me, and I was disappointed in her. But why don't you give her my copy, and she can see for herself how it ends? It should be in one of those boxes you took up to the attic. Damn it, she said, one of those boxes. It sounds like a simple task, but Sarah is an avid buyer and reader of books, none of which she wanted to part with. Consequently, this attic has accumulated at least one box of books for every year of the 18 during which we were married. I think she had more books there than you can find in the average local library. My God, it's going to take me a month to get through all these boxes. Don't be a fool, Mike. I remember reading it at the time I got pregnant with Christina. All these boxes have the year when we put them together written on them. All you need is to find a suitable box. So, on Sunday morning, I went up the stairs to the attic and started looking for a suitable box, which in the end, I found. Pleased with myself, I put the book in my briefcase. Joyce has been my right-hand man in the office for so long, and she's always done something for me. I was going to please her on Monday. Of course, I mean the book. God, how some people's dirty minds work. What's that stupid smile about? Joyce demanded when she came to our meeting on Monday morning. Is my petticoat peeking out, or what? No, I just have a little gift for you. Oh, my God. Have you approved my promotion? You're damn lucky. The cadres coordinate those who deserve a promotion, but then they have to withdraw money from their accounts. It's not as simple as we all would like. No, it's a Spanish doctor in Paris. That book you were so upset about losing last week, wasn't it? Oh, thanks, Mike. That's so sweet of you. Where did you find her? It's not me. Sarah had a copy that she read many years ago. I just had to spend most of yesterday looking for her. Yes, exaggeration again, but it earned me a kiss on the cheek. On the cheek, I said. Thanks, Mike. I do not know what I would do without you, Joyce said. No, it's the opposite, Joyce. I would have died without you. While Joyce was flipping through the book, probably looking for the place where she stopped, a small card fell out of it. It looks like Sarah left her bookmark here, she said, picking it up from the floor and placing it on my desk. I think she said that it was too long for her, so she refused to read further. It's too long, you're right. But I really want to find out who the killer is. Thanks again, Mike. Joyce left me to continue my work, and I didn't think about that little card anymore. Until later that day, he began to clean his desk. I picked it up and, after just a cursory glance, threw it in the trash. But you know how it is. You read something quickly, and only after a few minutes you realize exactly what you just read. When I realized what I had just seen, I pulled the card out of the basket again. It was a memo card that is given in some hotels. It had the name of the hotel, the room number, and the booking date 23/04/86, as well as the names of the guests. The names of the guests on this one read, Mr. and Mrs. M. J. Garrett. This is me, Michael Jeffrey Garrett, and my wife. But there was one problem. It was the Majestic Hotel on the outskirts of the city, but as far as I know, I couldn't even remember being near this place at all, not to mention booking a room there. So where did this card come from, and how did my name appear on it? I put it in the top pocket of my jacket with a slight curiosity and immediately forgot about it. Well, almost. I planned to ask Sarah about it later. Having forgotten about her, I remembered only about a month later. I asked Sarah if she would dry clean a couple of my suits, one of which was the one I put the card in the pocket of. That evening, when I got home, I found on the dresser all those ordinary things that accumulate in pockets and which Sarah took out when preparing suits for cleaning. Looking through all the old receipts, etc., I suddenly remembered the hotel card. But she wasn't there. Sarah, when you were emptying my pockets this morning, did you see a Majestic Hotel registration card among all this junk? No, Michael, just what I left on your dresser. I have to admit that she reacted quickly and correctly, but she made a mistake. Yes, Sarah had just made a mistake that caused alarm bells to ring in my head, and I felt a kind of cramp in my stomach. Before she spoke, she didn't stop for a second to think about what she was going to say. She didn't blush or turn away, and when she answered, she looked me straight in the eye, saying, "No, Michael." And that told me something was wrong. I am Mike to everyone and always have been. I've never been called Michael except by Sarah, and then only when she was angry or upset about me. It's one of those bells that you pick up if you've been married as long as we have. But Sarah called me Michael. So who was she upset about or angry at? To herself, of course. She realized that she had made a mistake when I found that hotel room card. When Sarah found this card in my pocket, she realized its importance. An importance she didn't want me to know about. That's why she took it out of all the other trash from my pockets. Oh, I thought there was a card from the Majestic room in the middle of it all. I was wondering if you know where she came from, that's all. And where the hell would she come from? Sarah asked. Well, that was interesting to me, since we never stayed there. The card was in that book of yours that I gave Joyce. I was just curious because we had never been there. I guess I must have gotten it from my brother. You remember that he and Stephanie stayed there when they came to Christina's baptism. You had to book them a room there because the Georgian was full. Oh, yes, that's right. I remember that all the hotels were booked because of some big conference, and I had to pay with a credit card when booking because otherwise they would not guarantee that they would be able to hold a room for them. Pretending to be satisfied, I left the topic. Well, it gave Sarah a good false sense of security. I had to admit that everything sounded good and plausible. But the actual question was about the date. I thought there was a lot I needed to know before I brought it up again, and letting Sarah think I was okay with the explanation might serve my purpose best. The question is about the dates, because I remembered that there is a discrepancy of a whole year. Sarah initially said that she had read this book before Christina was born. Christina was born on January 20th, 1987, and when she was baptized, she was 3 months old. Apart from the fact that the date differs by a year, this book was most likely already in the attic by that time. The first thing I did the next morning was to call Joyce into my office. Joyce, what are you doing with my old desk diaries? I keep them in my desk drawer for a year, in case we need to refer to them. Then I send it to the archive. Why are you asking? Can you go to the archive for me and find out if they can look through the archives for 1986 and 1987? Jesus, Mike, this is ancient history. I didn't even work for you then. What do you need them for? Personal reasons, Joyce. I need to check something. If you want, I'll go myself in a few minutes and see what I can find. An hour later, Joyce came in and threw the diaries on my desk. She looked at me quizzically, but didn't say anything. When she left, I looked at April 23rd, 1986. It was Wednesday, and as I feared, that morning I left for a business trip to Germany, returning on the evening of the 24th. Out of interest, I searched around the date of Christina's baptism, but I couldn't find any mention of booking a room at the Majestic, although I remembered doing it. Not that it made any difference, since the baptism was held on weekends. I knew that this card was dated April 23rd, and I was almost sure that it was 1986, not 1987. Especially for BASDWEAPIN. Are you since April 23rd, 1987, fell on a Thursday? This card could not relate to the hotel reservation for the time of Epiphany, since it was held on Saturday, although I couldn't pinpoint the exact date. I was still sitting and looking at my diaries when Joyce returned to my office with a cup of coffee for me. "What's wrong, boss? You look confused. You remember that book I gave you and that card that fell out of it?" "Well, my name was there, but I never stayed at the Majestic. I was curious, that's all. And it also looks like I was at a conference in Germany that day. I can't figure out why Sarah would have that damn room card." "What date was on it?" Joyce asked after she took the diary from me. "April 23rd, 86, I told her. "Are you sure?" "Yes, I'm damn sure. And for some reason I can't figure out how the card disappeared from my pocket." Joyce said, looking through the diary. "Why did you draw all these stars in the margins?" I looked at what she meant. At that time, Sarah was trying to get pregnant. They are, well, in general, taking into account our meetings. Damn, you two worked hard, didn't you? Do you know that you might have overdone it?" "Wait," Joyce said, skimming the book back and forth. "There are no stars from the 10th to the 17th, so I'm guessing Sarah had her period at that time. Then 2 stars a day until the 23rd, when I assume you left. None on the 24th, since you were absent. But you freaked out when you came back, apparently, on the night of the 24th. I assume that I recorded the next day on my account. That is, it looks like you two overdid it after you came back. If you think about it, it was a long time ago, but now I remember. I thought Sarah was trying to wear me down after I got back from that trip. She almost fucking killed me, but it must have worked because she finally got pregnant that month." My voice must have disappeared at the end of the sentence, as the true meaning of what this card could mean struck me. "Wait, Mike. Let's not jump to wrong conclusions." Joyce obviously thought the same way I did. "Do you have any other ideas as to why that damn card disappeared so mysteriously and why Sarah claims she didn't see it? But she had to take it out of my jacket pocket." "Well, I don't have any ideas, but you keep assuming something else, Mike. You need to talk to Sarah about this very carefully. If you're wrong, you can ruin your marriage for nothing by accusing her of something you don't have proof about." Joyce put her head in her hands and stared at the table for a while. Then she picked up the phone and called someone. "Martin, how far have your client records gone?" She waited until Martin answered. "Well, can you see if you have M.J. Garrett on your list?" Another pause. "Yes, the local address. I'm glad you transferred all your old files to your computer." "Only twice," she said, making notes in a notebook. "Do you have any idea how they were booked and paid for?" "What about Mrs. S. Garrett?" "Okay, thanks, Martin. I owe you." "While, I'm sorry?" "Oh, that would be great. Then pick me up at 7 tomorrow night." "While." Joyce hung up and looked at me. "Martin is the manager of Majestic. We have come a long way with him. We were lucky that a few years ago they put all their old files on the computer. Your name appeared in their records only twice. April 23rd, 1986, for one night. The double room is booked by phone and paid in cash. Then, on May 1st, 1987, a double room for one night was booked again by phone and paid for by a Majestic. I guess this is your card. You're not on their mailing list because you live so close to them. So I had the right date on that card? It seems so. I was hoping you were wrong. What are you going to do now, Mike? It was a long time ago. And you were happily married for so many years? Was there? If what I'm afraid happened that night, Christina may well not be my daughter. My whole life could have been a huge lie. No, Sarah loves you. I know she does. Of course, she wouldn't do something like that to you. There must be some other explanation. Well, anyway, something happened that night, all those years ago. Something that Sarah has kept me in the dark about ever since and still wants to hide from me. Somehow I have to reassure myself that Christina is my child. I can't live with doubt. And how do I know that Sarah hasn't been walking, behind my back all these years? When I started my relationship with Sarah, she was a pretty wild party girl. But I've always had fun with her. I knew she had quite a lot of experience, and I accepted it. I believe that this is the decision that many people have to make when choosing their life partner. Sarah's previous wild lifestyle never bothered me because I myself lived just as intensely. When we moved in together, we both calmed down. At least, I thought it was. Now I have doubts about Sarah. I think that nowadays it is easy to answer the question of whether you are Christina's father. You just need to do a DNA test. And how the hell am I supposed to do that without arousing Sarah's suspicions? It's easier than you think. My brother is doing research at the university. They take DNA samples all the time. Something for the sake of trying to trace people's origins. You know where the Vikings, Saxons, Normans, and all that came from, for example. I'll call him, and we can pretend that he asked you to participate in his research. Then you will ask Christina and Sarah to participate as well. If Sarah makes any objections, at least you'll know that you have something to worry about. More precisely, Sarah will be worried that you will find out something. All right, Joyce. Call him and see if you can arrange it. The next night at dinner, I brought up the topic of DNA testing with Joyce's brother and told Sarah and Christina that he had asked me if we would participate in his project. Sarah answered quite firmly. When I mentioned it, she said after some thought that she did not want to participate and did not want Christina or me to participate in it either. She explained this by saying that the government would have too much information about us. She thought it was an invasion of privacy. When I told her that this was an academic study, she pointed out that, after all scientists work for the government. It is the government that runs all universities. I didn't argue and agreed with her. I discovered what I wanted to know. But she didn't know that the ball was already rolling. When Joyce explained to her brother what the problem was, he offered to do an analysis with me and said that if I wanted, he could get the DNA he needed from hair samples. They usually didn't work that way, but he has access to the necessary technology. 3 weeks later, I told Sarah that we were going to a restaurant for dinner on Friday night. She was excited and curious when I didn't tell her where we were going. Whether she realized that shit was about to hit the fan or not, I'm not 100% sure. But she was pretty depressed when we first arrived at the majestic restaurant. Why did we come here? What is it? She asked. Joyce's boyfriend is the manager here, and she told me how nice it is here. I thought there would be no harm in trying. My explanation seemed to calm her fears, and we had lunch together. After leaving the restaurant, Sarah was embarrassed again when I led her to the elevators. By the time we got to room 419, I could feel her shaking all over. She didn't say anything and only slightly resisted when I brought her into the room. I took her to one of the chairs and she collapsed into it. So, Sarah, the game is over. I know you've been in this room before. Will you tell me about it now? Or will I leave this room a bachelor? She looked at me, clearly confused and with a very scared expression on her face. But she didn't offer anything, so I took an envelope out of my pocket and handed it to her. What is it? What is it? She asked, taking it from me. The results of the DNA tests, Sarah. I did these tests anyway. Do you want to guess what they're saying? There was complete panic on Sarah's face. But they can't. You are Christina's father. I was completely sure that you would be. Her voice trailed off. Do you want to continue, Sarah? To be honest, she couldn't say anything because she was crying so hard and her head was covered with her hands. There was a knock on the door, and it took me by surprise. I opened it to see Joyce and Martin standing there. I'm sorry, Mike. I thought you might need a referee. Martin will stay outside, but if you don't mind... Look, you're a very level-headed guy, Mike, but I think we'd better be here inside in case you lose your temper. Come in if you want, Joyce. But I don't think we'll need you, Martin. I've had enough time to get used to everything. Anyway, thanks, my friend. Martin nodded to me when I closed the door, but it seemed that he was not going to leave, and I realized that, as I had expected, there was a master key in his hand. Joyce sat in the other chair next to Sarah, and I sat on the bed. Sarah, Mike is my boss, but I've always considered you both my friends. I probably don't know as much about all this as Mike does, but I think I know most of the same things as Mike. However, I fully intend to remain neutral. I just think you need someone you can both talk to, so that this evening does not turn into a verbal altercation. Well. Joyce reached out and took Sarah's hand. Sarah looked at her, and they exchanged comforting smiles. I can't say that I was too excited about Joyce's presence, because I was really bluffing a lot. I really needed to know what happened that night all those years ago and why. I was worried that Joyce might be a little too neutral. She and Sarah always got along well with each other. Are you going to tell me about it now, Sarah? Or will I leave this room a bachelor? No. Oh, please, no, was all Sarah could say before she started crying again. Damn it, I was getting impatient after all this. Maybe having Joyce here is a good idea. Okay, Sarah, let me tell you what I learned. Guess what? Back in 1986, this hotel was not fully computerized. Everything was written down on small pieces of paper. And believe it or not, it turns out that somewhere in the basement there are still all these pieces of paper. Perhaps you still don't understand, but Martin was very kind and looked into booking this room for me. I pulled the photocopy out of my pocket. It's all a bit mysterious, but I think we've figured out what it all means. On April 21st, 1986, just after 10 in the morning. That's right, isn't it? A woman called the reception and booked a room, this room, for the night from the 23rd. She called herself Mrs. Garrett. But they must have told her that they needed a credit card number to confirm the room reservation, just as they did for me a year later. After receiving my Immediate Exchange card number, they crossed out Mrs. S. Garrett and entered Mr. M. J. Garrett. When I used Immediate Exchange, you had a duplicate card in my account, didn't you? I should have realized that the number refers to this card. On the night of April 23rd, a man and a woman had dinner at the restaurant, and the bill was charged to this room. Then, at 8:30 p.m., an international phone call was made from this room. It's strange, or maybe not, but I remember receiving this call at my hotel in Germany. You told me that when I called home, you were at the neighbors, and now you're answering my call. You knew my habits well. The next morning, breakfast was served in this room for only one person. Why? I have no idea. Weren't you hungry? Did you have enough protein for breakfast that morning? Perhaps you can enlighten me on this? At 9 a.m. on the 24th, Mr. Forrester paid for the room with a check. It looks like he planned to pay in cash, but your couple must have spent too much money on dinner and room service. The word cash was crossed out and a check was written out instead. Maybe he didn't have enough cash. By the way, how much did you charge him for the night, Sarah? This is inappropriate, Mike. Joyce interjected. I ignored her comment and continued. In any case, it must have caused some small scandal, because they realized that they needed to somehow verify his identity. It turns out that your Mr. Forrester was a police sergeant. How many times have you? I'm sorry, Joyce. Made love to that bastard, Sarah? Sarah, who was quietly sobbing and staring at the floor, looked at me. I do not know what you want me to say. I want to know the truth. You had an affair with that asshole Forrester in this room when I was out of the country. 9 months later, Christina was born. What the hell were you doing trying to get pregnant by him? Oh my God, no. I have taken all possible precautions. So you admit that you slept with this Pratt Forrester? I can't deny it, can I? You have the documents. But why? Did you love him, or what? How long has this been going on? Did you love him? You must be fucking kidding. I hated that bastard. He took me, and there was nothing I could do about it. But he talked too much that night, and I had a voice recorder that he didn't know about. So I booked a room so that I would have access to it before he arrived. I wrote down everything he said to me in this room that night, so he couldn't blackmail me for the bed again. Are you saying he blackmailed you into sleeping with him? Yes, he was blackmailing. I just wish I had the sense to go to the police instead of giving in to the bastard. But I was young, stupid, and naive. This is what Jenny did when he tried the same thing with her. Jenny? How the hell does she fit into this? Jenny had the same problem as me, but she had more damn sense than I did. I didn't know that the police and the courts would keep our names and details secret. You didn't even know anything about it when I went to court to testify against the bastard. By that time, I was completely confused, but I began to feel some relief. What Sarah said about blackmail lifted a huge weight off my shoulders. If she went with that ass because of blackmail, then I felt like I could put up with her betrayal. I went over to her, picked her up and hugged her. She was sobbing on my shoulder. But what about Christina and the DNA results? She muttered. These papers say that Christina is my daughter. Apparently, Your precautions worked. But you made me think. I had an empty gun, Sarah. I just wanted you to tell me the truth, that's all. But I'm afraid we've come to the most difficult part now. What the hell did Forrester have on you that made you agree to his demands? Oh my God. Do you really want me to tell you that? In a word, yes. And don't lie, if you don't mind. I'll check everything out. Sarah pulled away from my arms and sat back down. I went back to sit on the bed. Oh my God. It happened long before we got married. You've seen these old photos of me and Jenny at those childhood summer camps in America. We have been working in them for 2 years in a row. Sarah paused and began to cry again. I do not know how to explain all this to you. I'm so ashamed of it even now. She stopped and sobbed again. Well, at the end of the season, they gave us up to 4 weeks before we went home. In the first year, Jenny and I teamed up with other English girls and went to Florida. We've had a great time these 4 weeks. It was worth it to spend the summer looking after little kids. Yes, I remember you telling me about it. But there was also a second year, which I didn't tell you about. Jenny and I were the only English women in the camp. So, we teamed up with 2 American women and a Canadian woman. When the season ended, we drove one of the American girls' car to Atlanta, to the coast. I'm afraid we spent a lot more money in the first couple of weeks than we intended. Jenny and I started talking about the fact that we would have to go home earlier, since we had made such a mistake. Well, we were all short of cash, and then one of the American girls said she knew a place where we could stay for a few days for free. We really should have known better about this. Mitch was always getting into trouble. She took us to that big country club hotel. When we arrived, there were a lot of girls hanging out by the pool in swimsuits. Michelle said it was a private gambling club for rich people, and they liked it when beautiful girls were in bikinis, distracting guys from the money they were losing. God, we were so damn naive. But Michi sounded so innocent. She was very convincing. Anyway, on Friday, we spent the whole day hanging out by the pool in our bikinis. There were several guests there, and some of them were chatting with us. I really didn't think anything about it. There were always guys out there in the States chatting with us. On Friday evening, they played cards and drank at the bar. I noticed that most, if not all, of the guys left with one or the other girl in the end. I do not know what time Jenny and I went to bed, but we both went alone. Saturday was the same as Friday, but there were a lot more men. A very nice guy named Tony talked to me, and he really liked me. He was pretty young, not like a lot of the guys there. He's been gambling for a while, and I think he's won quite a lot. But then he spent the rest of the evening dancing and talking to me. Jenny was picked up by another nice guy, and around midnight we all went swimming. After that, it seemed quite natural to go to bed with Tony. You know, I've never hidden that I slept with a few guys before we met. I usually didn't go to bed with guys right after I met them, but you know how it is when you're on vacation, and I was just on it. Anyway, hell broke out around 3 o'clock in the morning. Tony, the guy I was with, jumped out of bed and put on his clothes within moments of the screams starting. He went outside for a while, and when he came back, he told me to get dressed quickly, because Jenny was hurt. I found Jenny downstairs with the paramedics who were helping her. Someone beat her up pretty badly. The police came and asked Jenny who had beaten her. When she told them, they didn't seem to look for him. They just kept asking her if she was sure and if she was wrong. Then Jenny and I were loaded into an ambulance and taken to the hospital. Jenny wasn't badly beaten, but she had some cuts and bruises. Just after dawn, the police came to the hospital and asked us to go with them to the police station. We assumed that they wanted us to make statements about the attack on Jenny. But when we got there, we were both accused of prostitution and put in a cell. We couldn't believe what was happening. We weren't cheating. Some lawyer came and said that he was assigned to represent us. He said that he had spoken to the police and, in connection with the available evidence, advised us to plead guilty. He said that since we are foreign citizens, they will do nothing but fine us and then deport us. We told him we hadn't done anything, but he informed us that there are several witnesses who are going to swear that we proposed to them, and there are at least 2 guys who are ready to say that they paid us to make love to them on Friday night. When we asked what would happen to the attack on Jenny, he said there was no record of the attack on her. When I asked him to look at her face, he said that the police report says that Jenny fell down the stairs trying to escape from the police. The lawyer said our only option is to plead guilty to prostitution. A little later, Tony came to Jenny and me. Tony said that there are several politicians in the club. He said he didn't know who the guy who attacked Jenny was, but he thought it was someone important. I asked if he could vouch for us and tell the judge that we weren't cheating, but he said he didn't want to mess with someone who had the authority to change police reports. Tony offered to plead guilty, then he would pay our fines and take us to the airport so we could leave the country. A little later in the morning, we were pushed, I can only call it that, into the courtroom. Almost before the charges were announced, our so-called lawyer found us guilty, and the judge imposed a fine on Jenny and me. I do not know how much. I was a little stunned, but I can only assume that Tony paid it, because before we realized what was going on, he drove us to the airport. Tony was acting like a friend, and we thought he was trying to help us. But when we discussed all this with Jenny later, we thought that he knew a lot more than we thought. We even thought that he was responsible for covering up the attack on Jenny. You see, at the airport, Tony somehow managed to get our luggage in, and then, before they put us on the plane, some other guy came up and said that we shouldn't try to return to the United States. He said that we had a criminal record for prostitution, and they would not accept us there, and the embassy in London would not issue us visas. That's why I didn't want to take the kids to Disney World the year you suggested it. If I try to go to the USA, they will definitely refuse to get me a visa, and I know you would insist on finding out why. I didn't want you to find out about it after what I've been through. Is that why you went with that ass, so that I wouldn't find out that a prostitution charge was fabricated against you? Yes. Somehow he got the police reports from the American police. He said he would send you and both our parents copies of this document. Your parents always had doubts about me. I was afraid of what would happen if they saw these reports. Oh my God, girl, and what do you think I would do? Divorce you or something like that? Well, yes, I was afraid that you would divorce me. We weren't married then, and I was going crazy. I didn't know what to do. I didn't even see the point in talking to Jenny about it when he contacted me. Jenny turned out to be much more reasonable than me. She immediately went to the police. When she opened up to me, I said that he had already blackmailed me. She was furious with me and said I was an idiot. She convinced me to tell the police about it. They took away the recording I had made and said they were going to accuse him of rape. I was scared of the publicity, but they assured me that they would not allow my name to leak into the news. When he found out that he would be charged with blackmail and rape, as well as trying to blackmail Jenny, he pleaded guilty. Police said he pleaded guilty to trying to gain the judge's favor in order to receive a lighter sentence. But why did you tape him raping you? Well, I could have been so stupid that I didn't go to the police at all, but I'm not completely stupid. I was pretty damn sure that once wouldn't be enough for him. I think he planned to make it a regular thing. About 2 weeks after that night, he called me one day and said he wanted me to meet him again. I played him the recording on my phone and told him that if he sent these American crime reports to anyone, I would go to the police with the recording. And he left you alone after that? No, not really. You remember that in '86 we had a theft. Well, I'm pretty sure he was looking for the recording. For a while, I was very worried about what he would do. But then, about 6 months later, Jenny called me and said that he had approached her and that she immediately went to the police. God, I have trouble accepting all this. This guy, Tony, or whatever his name was, have you ever heard of him again? No, but I've seen him on TV more than once. A few years ago, one of the conventions was shown on the news. You know, the one where they choose those who are going to run for president. Well, I'm sure I saw Tony standing in the background. I switched over and watched the news on the BBC. They were showing the same piece of footage, and it was him. God, I think I remember that night. I couldn't understand why you were suddenly so interested in someone who was going to run for president in the United States. You've never been interested in politics. Now you know why I wouldn't trust any of these buggers if I could stay away from them after what they did to Jenny and me. One of those perverted bastards knocked poor Jenny down because she wouldn't go to bed with him, and then called us both cheaters to avoid a scandal. Who would believe a cheater if Jenny made a fuss? They even managed to ban us from entering their damn country. Sarah, who seemed to have gained some control over herself, now began to cry again. I sat in silence, putting everything she had told me into my mind. Sarah was right when she said that my parents were not happy with my choice of a life partner. When I told them that we were engaged, they tried to dissuade me from marrying her. I didn't even know how brazenly they must have told her their opinion. Joyce coughed, and Sarah and I looked at her. Well, Mike, Sarah told her part. Now it's time for you to say something. You can't keep her waiting forever. Is Martin still here? I asked Sarah. She got up and opened the door, and Martin stuck his head inside. Martin, do you have another room? There are a lot of them. It's a quiet night. Which room do you need? Well, I was thinking about the bridal suite line. I think my wife has unpleasant memories of this room. I think we need a room where we can both feel at ease. Isn't that right, Sarah? Sarah didn't answer. She just jumped off the chair and clung to me on the bed. I do not know when Joyce and Martin left, but I hope they didn't stick around too long. Life goes on. I found that I could let Sarah spend the night with Forrester behind my back. Sarah's conviction is a little different, though. I tracked down the policeman who was in charge of the case against Forrester, mainly because I was thinking about a little personal revenge, but I didn't tell him that. He said that Forrester had a bad time in prison, as he was a former police officer and apparently not very pleasant. Somewhere in the process, someone, maybe some poor bastard he had previously put behind bars, got to him. He was beaten so badly that now he was somewhere in a nursing home like a vegetable. But the officer went on to tell me that the story Sarah and Jenny had told him about the trumped-up prostitution charge had piqued his interest. A few months later, he told the story to an FBI agent he worked with. This story must have piqued the interest of the FBI agent, too, because after the agent returned to the States, he later returned to him and said that, in his opinion, the girls were most likely telling the truth. He checked out the country club, and it's not a place where the police would normally raid in search of cheaters, as he said. The club would rather quietly kick them out of there than give bad publicity to the arrest of a cheater inside the institution. Although the agent believed that half of the female staff was still in the game. The FBI agent found it a little strange that Sarah and Jenny's cases were sealed by the judge who originally reviewed their case. When the agent applied for access to the files, he quickly discovered that his superiors had forced him not to wake the sleeping dog. The FBI agent was almost certain that the girls had been framed to keep them quiet. Life goes on.